Welcome back to another episode of Student of the Game. Today I'm joined by my friend Brian Lessinger. Appreciate you being here, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So today we're going to talk about money. I think there's a lot of things that people are uncomfortable talking about. We'll leave some of those off this topic, but money is definitely one of them. Brian, a little bit of his background. We connected because we're both real estate professionals. We were a part of this coaching program. That's the largest coaching program for realtors in the country. All the top level realtors that are part of this. We sell 1 in every 8 homes in America. And Brian and I connected because of that. But I think the relationship went a little deeper when we started talking about basketball and sports and investing and all the things that, we kind of share similar interests in. But Brian's done over 2,000 real estate transactions in the last 25 years, has been the owner and operator of the Lessinger team at Remax Gold, owns an office building, has an MBA in finance and a minor in economics. Sounds like you like to talk about money, Brian.
Well, it was just one of those things I was fortunate. I come from a family that did actually talk about these things where a lot of people did not. And I think because we did, over time it served me well. And now I'm just trying to pass that along and help other people talk about things that sometimes are a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, it's I think that's important. I mean, we've talked about setting goals on the podcast. We've talked about we've had a lot of different interviews. We talked about the health. We've talked a lot of stuff, but money is something we haven't taken a deep dive into yet. And I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. I know you're running a business and you're trying to grow, and there's so many challenges with how do you build your database? How do you pick up clients? Cash flow. How do I make money? How do I save money? So many things are similar when we're talking personal finance as well. So Brian, I want to dive into, some of the fundamentals of money. But what I would
Right.
love for you to do right now is as you're listening to this show, if this is helpful, screenshot this and tag us on social. That way we'll know if this was helpful for you, and then we can make more content. And we'll make more content just like it. And if you don't tag me and screenshot this, I know we probably won't talk about money again. But Brian, let's talk about mastering the fundamental as it relates to money. And you're going to hear me shout out Brian here at the end, guys. But he has a YouTube page called The Complete Money Playbook. He's on YouTube. There are some great videos. I've been watching them. I've been sending them to my kids, and there's a lot of really good insights on money. So let's dive into the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals to money?
Well, I tell people all the time, these things work for both, entrepreneurs that are listening. Obviously, you and I both run businesses versus your personal finances. So it all kind of works together. But I tell people there's really only 4 things you can do with money in the first place, which is earn it, spend it, save it, or invest it. And I think a lot of people are pretty good at earning it, and a lot of people are pretty good at spending it. But it's that saving it and investing part where I think people tend to struggle. And it's just because I think a lot of people just aren't paying attention to it. And it's like, the absolute worst thing you can do with money is just not pay attention to it at all. I always tell my kids, and we've been sitting with a bunch of young people talking about this on a regular basis, and it's like money does only what you tell it to do. So if you tell it to do something, it will do it. It's just an inanimate object. It gets you where you need to go financially. And so, we talk about these 4 basic things all the time and how they can put their programs in place so that they can get ahead financially. And as everyone knows in today's world, with all the talk about inflation and all the other things, it's harder than ever, especially for these kids in their 20s and 30s trying to get somewhere.
What so you talk about money a lot. You have a passion for teaching, young kids, obviously, but adults as well. Um, I'm just going to ask a question and kind of
Yeah.
call you out. Like, what gives you the right to talk about this? Like, have you been successful with money your whole life? Was there a point where you said, "Hey, I have to, figure this thing out," or what happened?
Right.
I got to imagine that there was some milestone that happened that turned you on to this passion of teaching other people.
Well, it was fortunate for me, like I said, something that we always talked about in my family from the time we were young. And then as an 18-year-old, when I went to college, you're supposed to try to pick what your degree is going to be in. And I had no idea what I really wanted to do. So I went ahead and got a degree in finance and economics, figuring whatever it is I eventually wanted to do, money's involved with no matter what your business is. And so as that started to happen, you learn in college all about corporate and business finance, but then you learn it's basically the same for personal finance. It's like you're running your own personal family business versus if you own a business, like a lot of people that are watching on here and you and I do, where we're own real estate companies, and you're trying to figure out how to run that business. And it really runs very similar. I always say like this was always the thing that was scary for me at first when I started talking about money, is then people are going to say, well, how rich are you? Or if you don't have enough money to say you're qualified to talk about these things. And so for me, we were doing all the right things, and I was a real estate agent in that '07, '08, '09 timeframe when the economy went to hell, and I literally was to the point where we were deep, deep, deep in debt, and then over a 10 or 12-year period, we went from deep in debt to the time over a decade, we probably went from negative 700,000 debt to literally $5 or $6 million worth of net worth in a 10-year window. So when people talk to me about it's too late to start, or when do I start, or how do I start? Well, if you don't start and you just ignore it, well, guess what? You're not going to get anywhere. And the biggest thing I love to talk to people about is really making sure, we're always talking about sports references, and I call it the complete money playbook. And I'm always talking to people about make sure you're playing your own game. Meaning, I compare my two mothers. I have my actual birth mom and my stepmom. And I always like to ask people, what is their definition of wealthy? So what does wealthy mean to you? And what I say wealthy means to me is that if I stop working today and I was generating enough money every month to live the life I want to live without going to work, then you're wealthy, meaning you're earning more money than you're spending, and I don't even have a job anymore. And whatever your net worth is. So, for example, my actual mom is probably not worth $500,000, and my stepmom is probably worth somewhere between, I don't know, 10 or $15 million. But to me, they're both wealthy. They're retired, they have no jobs, they enjoy their lives, they do what they want to do. And so, depending on what your goals are and where you want to get to, whether you're a married couple, whether you're an individual, figure out what your game is going to be, make your financial long term and short term plans, and then play your game. And don't worry about what other people are doing. And it's funny because most wealthy, or people that think about wealth, are talking about cars and trips and houses and jewelry. And really, a lot of times, those people aren't wealthy. Wealthy people you would most of the time never even know because they're wealthy behind the scenes. And so, that's how I always try to start with people. Am I any more qualified than anyone else? No, but I like to call it everyday wealthy. I'm everyday wealthy. I make plenty of money without ever selling a house to somebody. And it makes my real estate business really nice because then I can coach people up on whether they should buy or sell a house or buy an investment property or not, knowing we're always going to give them the answer that's best for them and not worry about what's best for me. Because if I just help enough people get what they want, as you know, then we get what we want. We make plenty of money too. So that's kind of how I've always thought of it that way, and it's worked really well for me.
That is so good. I have a lot of thoughts that cross my mind as you're talking. The first one is if you're a business owner out there, I know you've experienced this before. I have when I was younger in my career, and to say I'm never going to go through this again is probably false. But you can sit at a kitchen table and give someone honest advice because you don't need to make that sale. You want to, right? You want to.
Yep.
But the reality is, if you're in a position right now where I think, income or revenue is the lead generator in the life that you want to live, right? Like you have to have some type of congruence, to your lifestyle, based on your income. And what you're talking about right there is that freedom of being able to look somebody in the eye and giving them the advice based on their needs and not your own needs. I mean, I'm sure we've
100%.
all sat there. It's funny you talk about what wealthy is. I think I look at wealth in terms of time as well, right? If you have ten thousand
Right.
dollars and I have $10,000 and I spend $10,000 a month and you spend $2,000 a month, I have 1 month of money and you have 5 months of money. Right,
Right.
and so
Right.
it's like how much can you make it last? And I think a lot of times, maybe I'm just speaking autobiographically here, but sometimes the comparison, comparison's not wrong, by the way. Like a lot of you've heard the quote, "Comparison robs us of our joy." I don't believe it. I think comparing against the wrong thing robs us of our joy. I can
Oh yeah.
if I'm 40 and I compare myself to somebody who's 50, like that's wrong. If I compare myself to somebody who's my same age but we're in different industries, that's wrong. But I think comparison can be good to kind of motivate you and inspire you. But we talk about you said wealthy is like cars and houses and vacations. It's funny. I was talking to my daughter before I came in here, and she's working on a project. She's interning here at Noll Team Real Estate, and she's working on a project as far as like high end markets. And so
Right. Right.
she sends me a house today, $115 million in Italy, and she's like, "Dad, whatever slang she uses, she's like,
Yeah. Right.
this eats or whatever." And in her mind, it's like, how can I make money and go buy this house? But that's really what you're saying is that's really not wealth.
Not really. And it's funny because I remember having this conversation with my former mother-in-law years and years ago when we were talking about, she was at that time in her late 50s, early 60s, worrying about getting to retirement. And we used to always say, like, how much money do you need? And her answer used to always be, if I knew how long I was going to live, I would knew how much money I was going to need. So this is that fear factor. I was just talking about this the other day. I think she'll be 80 on her next birthday. And we were having this exact conversation. And I said, What I'm looking at is it from a different perspective now, because I think what people talk about, like net worth versus wealthy, it's kind of not the same thing. My feeling on it is that if I want to live a lifestyle of, say, $25,000 a month of income, and I can own enough assets that will pay me $25,000 a month in income without working, well, then I can live a really long time and not run out of money. And so there's different philosophies on how retirement works and how wealth building works. And so, I just like to sit down with people and for the most part, start off like you always talk about, those basic fundamentals. As much as people hate to talk about it, it's about basic budgeting and looking at your finances and figuring out, how can I make a little more money? How can I spend a little bit less money? How can I figure out how to start building up some assets that are starting to pay me money? And it's those kind of things. And we've talked about it. For those who don't know, I mean, I own, Brad's team's helped me buy some homes. I own some homes in Indiana. And part of that was, I'm a real estate agent in Nevada. Well, why wouldn't I just do it here? Well, his price points are different, his rents are different. And that's the nice point, is if you have connections around the country, where if Brad and I were talking, we wanted to buy real estate even in another market, well, between us, we know realtors everywhere in America. And real estate is one of the best ways to build up your wealth. And so it's really just trying to get them to, start from zero and just think about, where am I trying to go? And the hard part is whenever the game is really long. Your kids are slightly younger than mine, Brad, because I'm a little older than you. But for two kids, my kids are 23 and 27 now, and they're in the middle of this, kind of trying to figure out how their life's going to go. When all of a sudden the finish line, your retirement age might be for them 70, 75, 80 years old, and it's a 50-year game. It's hard to see that sometimes when that finish line is so far out there. But I just promise them, it's like, if you just keep doing these small little things, and you learn some basic terminology on how amortization schedules work and other things, you'll have so much money you won't even know what to do with it, without it being as hard as people make it out to be.
So I love talking about fundamentals because it just
Yeah,
simplifies everything. Like we always talk about, fundamentals will never change. The strategies and tactics that we use are going to
right,
change based on what the market's doing. If interest rates are high or low, it may change your strategies or your tactics, where you're putting your money. But you make it
right.
so simple talking about earn, spend, save, and invest. I think the first question that everybody listening here thinks that they can out earn their way to success, and talk about the earning part for a little bit, because I think a lot of times we get so focused on the earning more money, like it's the death of
Right,
more. Talk about
right.
the fundamental of earning. What do you teach about just earning in general?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because typically I don't even start off with the earning part, because usually people are earning a halfway decent income. That's not usually their problem. Their problem typically is a spending problem and a debt problem. And I tell people, like, if you've got $20,000 worth of debt on a credit card, paying 20+% interest rate on it, and you got $20,000 in a bank account, even in today's environment where the high yield savings accounts might earn you 5%, 5% is still a lot less than 20%. And so I tell people, the biggest thing you've got to be able to do is basically have no debts. Now, a mortgage on a property is one thing, because that's a good debt on an asset that's appreciating. But it's all these other debts that people get in trouble with, whether it's just cars, personal loans. And occasionally, as you know, people, have life troubles. They're out of work. Someone gets sick. And next thing you've got some debts for some reasons that maybe are not really in your control. But I always tell people, when we sit down, is figure out every place you make money, figure out what your actual budget is, and then we got to figure out what your debts are, what those payments are, what the interest rates you're paying on those are, and figure out how we're going to attack that and get rid of it. Because I tell people, if we got rid of all these debts and all these payments over here, that takes so much stress and pressure and all these things off of you. Because I mean, as much as we hate to say this, we help people buy and sell homes. And a lot of times, I know when I first got a license, you think it's always going to be for good reasons. First time home buyers, they move up, they get a bigger house, they have kids, it's all happy and joyful. And a lot of times we sell houses because grandma passed away, or people are getting divorced, or family drama caused them to then go their separate ways. And that was part of how this started. I mean, I kept sitting in living rooms with people that were old enough to be my parents and grandparents, and financially they were a disaster. Or you're watching other couples, getting divorced because financial pressures got to them. And I really do think, in most couples, one person's more of a saver investor and one person's more of a spender. And if they just sat down and communicated these topics and figured a way to get on the same page, because I always say you can do both and. But sometimes you got to do more, a little of the hard work early. And as we always talk about, if you're doing the hard work early, we're basketball guys. And I always, as a big guy in high school, it's like, do your work early. It's going to pay off in the long run, right? Sprint the floor, get in front of that. So it's those kind of things where, it'd be great for everyone to make more and more, but I think they got to focus on that debt reduction part first.
I didn't know I was going to ask this question, but it just kind of came to me as you're talking. So a lot of
Yeah.
times, as business owners, we set goals, and it starts with income. It starts with, what do you want to make next year? What do you want to make this
Mhm.
quarter? And do you have any framework around goals for spending or saving or investing? I know you've got a percentage of, like, invest 20%, right? And I've some of
Yeah.
these. I'm going to point people to your YouTube, the Complete Money Playbook. Go to YouTube and watch his videos; they're great. I watched your shorts. There's 10-minute videos. A lot of it is just very, very good information in a short period of time. But talk to me about, what's the focus that you can give people when they're setting goals that's not just about income.
Right. So, like, for example, in my real estate business, and I know what the minimum is. I always kind of go like, it's kind of funny how I do it. I'm sort of a worst case scenario guy. I go, how many homes and how much revenue do we need to generate so that staff is paid, business is happening, we're covering all our expenses of running a business. And then, every dollar, like those first dollars, you might be making 50 cents on the dollar. But those later dollars that you're making, you might be making 85 cents on the dollar because you have like these fixed costs, as you know. So I always look at it as what is our minimum amount of production that we need to do, which usually sets me at ease knowing, well, we could easily do that. And then from there, you realize those deals that now we're getting into the third and fourth quarter. If we have a huge fourth quarter, that quarter is so much more profitable than as the beginning of the year because your fixed costs don't change. Maybe we do a few more deals. You have a few more people come to your client parties. You have a few more closing gifts. So great. I'll buy closing gifts all day long to help people as far as that goes. But it's really kind of focusing on where we need to be minimum makes the pressure gone, and then you just go from there. Increasing sales, like you said, sometimes, as you know, it runs in cycles a little bit, especially in the real estate business. But I just keep saying, if we keep doing right by our clients, and as you know, asking them, hey, if we do a good job for you, if we do the right things for you, if we help you, and know we have your best interest at heart, tell other people because it's a lot easier for me to not have to go try to find the next client. It's a lot more fun to just get to help people. And I think you and I have done a good job over the years where the majority of our clients now are people that do already know, like, and trust us, that have a relationship with us. And if they don't, they got referred directly in from someone who does. And it just makes that trust factor so much easier so that when I am spewing out this information, there's a trust built in, even though they don't really know me that well at the beginning. And it's just win-win for everybody. And that's been the goal all along.
Well, I think I'm gonna go back to something you said earlier. Is like, in real estate, we have a lot of clients. Matter of fact, probably over 50% of them that we call it the 3 Ds. They're going through the 3 Ds: death, divorce, and delinquency. I lost my job,
Mhm.
can't make a payment. Right? Maybe
Yeah.
I bit off more than I could chew. I was banking on the rates coming down. Somebody told me to marry the house and date the rate, and that didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah, right.
but but what I want to do is I want to talk about, how do you take this gift that you have of finance, right? Because not everybody's great with money. How do you
Right.
take this and use it as an asset? And it's kind of a rhetorical question. I know the answer to it. This is what I heard as a business owner. If all Brian
Right.
Lessinger does is sell homes, you're good at what you do. But what you've done
Right.
now is you've taken a gift of yours is understanding money, and you're now coaching your clients. If you aren't comfortable with money, but you're really good at something else, and you've got this database, this list of relationships, what I'm hearing from Brian is, go give that gift away. Go give that gift to
100%.
those clients. If you're selling t-shirts, if a financial advisor and you have some other gift, go give that to your clients, right? I mean, if you understand. I was talking to a buddy of mine who runs a business and has a great marriage, right? That's a gift that he has. And so he's going on vacation next month, and they're doing a marriage retreat. And that's something that he's
Right.
doing as part of, like, this is who I am. This is my brand. This is what I'm building. I understand this. It comes easier to me than other areas, and I'm going to go bless other people with it. And that's what you're doing with money.
100%. And it's funny because, certain clients you might bring it up, and I'll always preface it like, if you don't want to go here, we don't have to go here. But for many people, they want to go there. They want to talk about this stuff. And once they get over maybe some initial embarrassment, or they're trying to figure out how maybe they're much older than I am and they feel like they should be much further ahead, I go, you are where you are. I mean, I always tell people, whatever's behind us is behind us. I can't worry about that anymore. I mean, when I was in my late 30s and damn near went broke because the economy went, it wasn't in my control. I did everything I could do. And then, yeah, it sucked and I started over and we did it again. So I know how this works and I know how to do this. And I just think in today's world with so much social media and all this other stuff, it's so easy to see all these things about Bitcoin and crypto and, things with jets and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's fine. if that's your thing and you want to do that's fine. But I'm just saying, like you talked about, it's the always starting off with these basic fundamentals. And if you just delay your gratification a little bit and you put in that hard work early and young, the payoff down the road is so big. But it's just in today's world, that whole delayed gratification thing is just hard for people. But if they could just get there, they'd be awesome at it. And like I said, it started off just bringing it up with clients, and it started to be a conversation more. And then all of a sudden, my son and his friends, they're all in their late 20s, mid late 20s, and next thing you know, they're coming to my house once a month and they're literally spilling their guts about what they do and don't know. And these are like kids that come from pretty good backgrounds, college educated, all have decent jobs, and they just didn't understand how to get ahead financially because unfortunately they don't teach that stuff in public school. And so they don't have a place to learn it unless you start searching around online. And because I do, you can find it online a lot of different places. And what you're just trying to find is a person that you connect with. Because nothing I'm talking about is anything that I didn't learn 35 years ago, 40 years ago in college. It's the same stuff. It doesn't change. Like you said, some of the things in today's world are a little different. But those fundamentals, they are what they are. And if you just put them into place, you will thank yourself later. But sometimes it just doesn't feel like winning. And in the short term, when you don't feel like you're winning, it's hard to keep motivated.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I want you to talk to the person who can't see down the road, the person that struggles
Right.
5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I mean, you even said with your kids, 50 years down the road. Most people
Yeah.
struggle with
Right.
that. Talk, like give them some practical advice. I think we've all heard this quote. We overestimate what we get done in a year, and we underestimate what we can get done in a decade. I had somebody on the podcast a little while ago that ran a massive race, 110 miles, and she wasn't even doing trail runs 3 years ago. So her 3 year journey was, I'm starting off and now I'm running 110 miles, 30,000 feet of elevation, 40-hour race. I mean, who does this stuff? And 3 years later, 3 years before, she was doing none of it. I'll shout out, I've got a team member, remain nameless, not going to embarrass anybody, but, but 3 to 4 years ago, they were in a totally different situation. And this person set a goal on my team. They knew who they are. They set a goal on my team to own some land. And like
Yeah.
borderline was embarrassed for sharing that goal because did not know how that was going to be possible. Well, guess what? This year, my man bought some land, has a house, going to build a nice pole barn and a garage, and can literally hunt off of his back deck. And it's
There
like,
you go.
and it's like he was embarrassed to share that goal. Maybe I don't know if he was or not, but you can picture yourself setting a big goal. You talked about your financial life dramatically changed in 10 years. Talk to the
Uh-huh.
person about what do they need to do to start. That maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they don't know where to start, maybe they don't know how to put a plan together. They think it's hard. Nobody's ever taught them about money. Like, give me
Right.
where am I starting at if I want to set this goal?
Yeah. So when I sat down with my son and his friends, here's exactly where I told them to start. And anymore, most of it now is apps on your phone. You don't have to wait for your bank statement to come in the mail anymore. But if you literally sat down, and it's funny because I sometimes feel like automation has been the enemy for people because they never feel the pain of spending their money. It just happens, swipe and whatever. I said, I really like them. And I did this at first was I literally had them take a pad of freaking paper and take it and write down, go through your bank statements, go through your credit card statements, go through anywhere that you have money moving around, write it down. How much money do I make? Not, hey, my salary is $100,000 a year. How much actually is getting deposited into your account? Because that's what really matters because you're paying taxes, whatever the case is coming out of those things. So write down what you're making, write down all your expenses. So if you're a renter, it's your rent, it's your utilities, it's your car payment, it's your student loan, whatever it is, write down all your expenses and then if you have any balance debts, a credit card, a car, write them down. What are my total debts? What is my interest rate on those debts? What's my minimum payment? And if I only made the minimum payment, how long would it take me to pay it off? So now we have a snapshot, a picture of where we're starting the game from. And then from there, if you don't know what to do, reach out to someone like myself. People that actually have gotten ahead are more than happy to sit down and talk to people about this stuff. You can call me directly and say, hey, I saw you on Brad's podcast and call me. I'm happy to talk to you about this stuff. It's no skin off my back and sort of put you in place on how this is going to work. Now, obviously, that's more difficult if you're two people versus one person. Because if you share your incomes and your expenses and you're a married person or there's two of you, that conversation is going to be a little more difficult than if it's one person. If it's one person, then you just have to decide, am I going to do this and better my situation or not? And again, all I can do and all any of us can do is I can give you the advice and the tools and the guidance and have someone you can bounce ideas off of. but then you have to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, then I can't help you. It's no, you and I have had realtors work for us for years. We know the plan to become a successful realtor. Not every realtor that worked for you and I was a successful realtor because they won't all do the work. And so you start there. Eventually, I would want everything to be automated. So again, in a perfect world, you're making money and your savings and investing is coming off the top. But honestly, saving and investing can't happen till all this high interest consumer debt is gone because you can't win because those interest rates are so high versus what you can earn in the stock market, let's say an average of 10% or high yield savings accounts, 5%. And yes, there are seasons and times where people earn higher percentages, but over the long haul, if we're talking about a 20, 30, 40-year game, you're not going to out earn your 20 or 25% interest rate you're paying on a credit card or your car loan or whatever it is. And sometimes it's unfortunate to say, maybe your stuff's too nice and you got to figure out a way to downsize your life for a while to get ahead. And it's a matter of how hard you want to work.
Well, I think there's a couple people that maybe just stopped in their tracks when you called them out and you said your stuff's too nice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's another financial expert that gets on the radio and the shows and has a famous line of saying, start acting your wage.
Yeah. There you go.
So,
There you go.
so, um, okay. So you gave us on how to start. You talked about writing it down. I think this podcast is for anybody, right? Anybody who
Right.
gets something from it. But there's a lot of business owners here. There's a lot of kids in high school listening to this. But if you're in high school or if you're an adult, we've all been a victim of automation. Like we've all been a victim of efficiencies. And what I love that you said is, you have to master that, right? You have to master that's falling in love with practice. Is you can't be great with your budget until you can get it on paper and you can understand what you're looking at. If everything's
Right.
automated, you can't understand what you're looking at. I love that.
Yeah. And that's the big thing with all that stuff is, I watch tons of finance and money content just because I'm paying attention, trying to see what I want to talk about. And then you see things that are structurally good fundamental things to do. And sorry that I'm going to use a word I shouldn't use on the show, but people shit on it because they want to make it sound like there's a way to make this happen really fast. And really, as my best friend and I'm lucky, my financial planner is my best friend. We got our degrees the same year. We met in college when we were 18 years old. We've been playing this game together now for a long time. We used to always say, be the tortoise, not the hare. And in the long run, the tortoise will win. But in the short term, it sucks because sometimes the hare drives a fancy car or bought a fancy house or bought a fancy watch and you want it. But in the long term, you'll get it and they'll be back starting from scratch again. And it's just one of those things where patience, and it's hard in today's world to be patient.
So you've given some great advice so far, and we'll start wrapping up here in a little bit. I got a couple more
Yeah.
points to talk about. Um, give the audience some advice. Okay, you've given them money advice,
Right.
but what advice would you have to initiate a conversation about money?
Right.
Like if
You
if
know,
I if I'm a 17-year-old girl, I'm gonna pick on my daughter for a second. How does she start
yeah, yeah.
talking to her friends about money? I mean, she has a job, she's saving, she's going to college, she kinda knows what she wants to do, but if I'm a 17-year-old girl, I'm a 43-year-old man who runs a business or anywhere in between, above and beyond, and you want some help, how do you just start the conversation about money?
Right. What I have done, especially with younger people, is start asking some questions that I think they're going to be surprised by the answer. So when you say to them, "Did you know 70% of Americans, if they had $1,000 emergency, don't have $1,000 to buy new tires on their car?" Or when you start to ask them, you hear the people talking about the dreaded one percenters in America, right? Those people that are in the top 1% of income earners. And you start to say, okay, how much money do you think you need to be to earn in the
No
1%? Or
nobody
what do you
likes the
think
one
your net
percenters
worth?
unless you're there, by the way.
Yeah, exact. So it's like it's 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 sometimes I think the numbers aren't as big as they think they are. And so I kind of start with them there and just sort of give them a little perspective on one, how, what those numbers really are, what your definition of wealthy is, what a one percenter is, and how to put the things in place to get where you want to go. So we typically kind of just start with some just basic, just having some conversation just to open up their minds and just have them thinking about why wouldn't you want to talk about money? I always think of things like sex and money as topics that nobody ever wants to talk about, yet they're happening everywhere. It happens in every household. And so you have to have those kind of conversations. I was very fortunate that my family talked about it. I was very fortunate I was in a long marriage for 26 years, and we were together almost 28 years. We got divorced a few years ago. We handle it. It's something I talk about with clients all the time as a really smart divorced couple because we still have a lot of things that, we own a building together still. We have two kids together still. So it's things that people don't want to talk about. You just got to go and talk about them. And so for a 17-year-old, I'm not so much worried about going and talking to their friends about it. I always like to say, okay, who can I go talk to that's living a life that looks like that life's pretty good? You know what? Brad and Lindsay Noll live a pretty good life. I think I want to talk to them about how they got where they're going and go talk to those people that are a little further down the road than you are and start there. The way you help your friends is you start doing it. So a couple of my son's friends now are homeowners. One just got married, has a kid. I remember when he just moved money from a regular savings into a high yield savings in the first month, he made like 200 something dollars in interest because he had a bunch of money sitting there for his down payment on his house. He called me, he goes, Brian, I can't believe that I just got 200 something dollars for doing nothing. I said, yeah, simple stuff like that. You're earning money by not, just making some smart, easy decisions. So it's really more just start doing it. Your friends will start to ask you. And then you can start having those conversations because it's really hard to just tell all your friends, hey, my dad said to do this.
Yeah.
And so, then they start to talk to their friends and it snowballs from
It's
there.
amazing that this whole thing, if I remember right, this whole thing started from just talking to your kids, sitting on the couch and in the living room and having a conversation, and their friends start asking you questions. Like they're
Mhm.
think about this, their friends is the reason that the Complete Money Playbook, began.
100%. And I tell them that all the time. It's like you said, I'm very fortunate because, and I'm sure you're this way too, Brad. We're the dads that, for whatever reason, my kids' friends will come talk to me. And for whatever reason, whenever one of them is struggling with something, even if it's not about money, it's some other just life thing, my kids will just go talk to my dad, call my dad, go meet with my dad, because for whatever reason, they feel like I'm a safe space. They can talk to me about stuff. And because you and I, all my friends, the 8 of them that come, 7 of them played college sports. One did not. And so these are kids like you and I can talk the language. We played the sport. We know what it's like to sit in the locker room. We know what it's like to have a good game, a bad game, be hurt, not be hurt. And so for whatever reason, they open up to us. I mean, I'm sure you get it on your end, with your kids and their friends too. And so because of that, we get to have some conversations that we're lucky to be able to have with these young people because sometimes they bring up stuff and you're like, "Ooh, I never thought of that either." And so it becomes like one of those things where you're trying to do good for them and they don't realize how many times they end up bringing some good stuff back to you without even knowing it.
Absolutely, and go back to the sports analogy for a second. There were times in my career where I was on the bench and not on the floor, and
Yep.
we're all like, maybe you feel like you're on the bench right now when it comes to money, and maybe you feel like you should be more successful than you are, and I had an opportunity to either sit on the bench and be quiet and never fix what needed to be fixed, or I could
Mhm.
go to the coach, a leader, a mentor, and say, I'd like to get some more minutes. What's happening? What am I not doing? Can I work? Is it something that, my IQ needs to grow? Do I need to get more shots up? Is my percentages down?
Yeah.
Like, help me understand. I want to be successful. Therefore, I'm willing to ask the question. I don't think people are willing to ask the question until they either hit rock bottom or till they get the confidence to say, staying where I'm at is not okay. And I
And I
want to
think
grow.
that's hard.
It's real
It's a
hard.
hard thing, especially, Brad, when you're talking about your 17-year-old. Those are hard questions to ask. They're hard questions for us to ask, and we're in our 40s and 50s. It's like I think as time goes on, you're more willing to ask those questions. You're more willing to be open about having those conversations. I'm very lucky because I know people like yourself, my best friend and I, we talk about things I think that a lot of men don't actually talk about. And because of that, it allows us to be able then to have these conversations with people and just say, hey, open up, be vulnerable, and say, you know what? I'm 40 years old and my financial situation is garbage, or my relationship right now is a mess, or me and my kids are just not jiving right. Whatever it is, how do we help each other? And I was very lucky because for years I had a bunch of friends. We played basketball on Sunday mornings. I think the best part of the basketball was when we were done, we'd sit around for a half an hour afterwards and talk about stuff that men don't talk about. And it was a very fortunate thing. Unfortunately, we don't do it anymore because COVID shut the gym down, and now I don't think any of us are in condition to go back to playing. We're afraid we're going to hurt ourselves. But for many years, it was an awesome experience. And this is what's nice is even for people like you and me that live across the country from each other, if push came to shove and we had something we wanted to talk about, I know I could pick up the phone, be vulnerable with you, and say, hey, I'm curious about your opinions on this because I think you and Lindsay are doing some things that are amazing. How do I work that into my relationship? Or how do I work that into my life with my kids that you do with yours? And so you work on those things. And I just think people need to not be afraid. Like, what's the alternative? To keep sitting on the bench and not playing.
Yeah, you gotta get in you
Okay.
gotta get in the game, so and,
Absolutely.
I know other people listen to this podcast, but I'm just talking to you right now. Our lake house is always open
Yeah.
for you if you ever wanna come, so.
Absolutely, man. I will be there again someday.
I want to talk a little bit about business finance. It's a little different than personal finance. The fundamentals are all the same. You know, a
Yep.
lot of times people ask me about my team and how I built it, and they ask some questions that I think that they don't know really the right question to ask. But
Right.
I'll just answer it. You know, how I built my team is I never looked at my income as my identity. I never looked at
Right.
the revenue that I was generating from business as my identity, right? So like in business, you start off and, maybe you start off making 25,000 and 50,000, 100,000, whatever that is. That doesn't matter the number. But what
Sure.
happens is when people look at business revenue and they think that that's their income, that in my belief, it will suffocate their growth. I
Mhm.
subscribe to a model called profit first, and it's a business model where there's percentages, we have revenue that comes in, and then twice a month we have transfers that go into certain accounts for profit, obviously profit first. It's the same as David Bach, pay yourself first. And
Yep.
we've got owners compensation accounts, we have a tax account, and we have an operating expense account, and I know
Yep.
there's allocated amounts that go into each of those buckets, and at the end of the quarter, we have a profit transfer. I think, and maybe the question here is, how do you relay this to personal finance, Brian? But I know that I think a lot of people fool themselves when it comes to business by taking profits and reinvesting them back into their business. Profits are profits.
Right. Right.
Profits are you're the business owner, right?
Right.
You deserve to invest in your future. So how do you translate that into personal finance when it comes to looking at your income as a household, like a business or like revenue? So like I said, just to sum it up, I've been able to grow my team because we can hire people because I don't spend everything I make.
Right.
I'll say it again, I don't spend everything I make. Guess what? You know why I do that? Because I used to, because I didn't have a
Right.
playbook,
Right. Right.
and so something needed to change. And so we've been doing this for about 8, 9 years now, and it's been fantastic. So how does a couple or even an individual have an income and not have that be their identity?
Well, it's funny you say the profit first part. So to me, it's kind of the same thing with I'm a big David Bach guy, read all his books, and it's no different than investing off the top first. So I always, to make the numbers round, use my little $100,000 income. And in a perfect world, you'd be on that 50/30/20 rule where you'd pull 20% off the top, and that 20% is for saving and investing. And if you did that first and you lived off the rest of the $80,000, as long as to me you didn't spend more than $80,000, then great. You're doing all the things you need to do because you did all the heavy lifting and all that stuff first. And so that's how I've always done it. It was the same thing with our business models. Like you said, we what we did is I just paid myself a salary as one of the employees of the business. And then at the end of the year, I just treated my salary as one of the expenses of the business. And at the end or at the beginning, each quarter or every 6 months, wherever when there was profit, like you said, you did these owner draws and put it into your other account. And a lot of times that money didn't get spent because I'm a big proponent of you and I are in sort of a high risk business. So I would say when people are talking about having a rainy day account or an emergency fund or whatever those cases may be, if you're someone like us who's self employed, I don't get a check every 2 weeks. I never know when my income is coming in, but I was able to alleviate that by giving myself a paycheck. And it's the same thing on your personal finances. It's like anything else. It's like, what you bring in, if you think of that as this is revenues to our household rather than this is our income, we generate 100,000 in revenues. How are we allocating those funds to run our family? And I think of it as your family is its own business. You've got to run it like a business. And so if you don't pay yourself first and invest off the top and figure out what your expenses are going to be, especially as your kids go from younger to older, you're getting ready to have some college age kids. And hopefully they're going to be on some scholarships and athletic, funding. And so you want to pay for as much as someone might have to pay for total. But at some point, you know, for some kids, college isn't going to make sense because it got so expensive for them. So you just have to kind of look at all the things and don't just put yourself in this box or this bucket of just doing what everyone else did. You've got to do what works for you. But if you just think of your personal life as revenues, just like you would as a business, it really kind of does work the same. The terminology is different. The way the accounts are going to look at it is different. And again, I have a CPA that I literally meet with probably 3 or 4 times a year. They are also my company's bookkeeper. So we're looking at these numbers all the time so you can figure out how to take advantages of taxes and maybe when I need to reinvest into my company and maybe buy some new equipment or however it is, you got to just treat it the same way. No different than every year. If my car now is 10 or 11 years old, and every year at the end of the year, depending on my company's business, my CPA is gonna be like, hey, is this year you need to buy a car? because it makes sense to buy the car at the end of the year to write up against the business. So it's really just finding someone you're comfortable with, sitting down and talking to, and especially if there's two people, just know this might be a little hard at first. And again, when you say your shit's too nice or your stuff's too nice, it's a little hard to hear at first, but they'll thank you later because then they get that thing going in the right direction. It turns into a good thing for them. But it's like anything else. You got to just put in the time and energy and practice and work at the beginning to set it all up, and then you can sort of set it and forget it and hopefully start making more. And if you leave your percentages the same, then you don't fall to that lifestyle creep and spending more than you should. And yeah, you can get nicer stuff if you guys start making more money and you just do all the stuff you need to do.
That's awesome. So, the Complete Money Playbook. Go follow Brian on YouTube. Amazing videos. I'll say it again. Amazing videos. I've been preparing for the podcast and I've been watching them. I think they're fantastic. So my kids will be subscribing as of this weekend. But thanks for jumping on here. You know, we talked about the fundamentals of money. We talked about the fundamentals, which are earn, spend, save, and invest. We talked about what that looks like. It's just hard work. Get a piece of paper and a pen out and start writing things down. Don't automate it until you fully understand it. Oh, and by the way, it's okay to admit that you don't understand something. That's where growth starts, right? I mean, in any area of your
100%.
life, your faith, your family, your business, your health, money, it does not matter what area it is, but you've got to admit that you need some help and go get it and don't be shy. So you're doing
Yep.
all this, you're adding a ton of value to not only your personal circle, your database, your clients, you're adding this to anybody who gets on the internet and goes to YouTube and subscribes to the Complete Money Playbook. But I've got to ask, this is all about mastering the fundamentals, falling in love with practice, and winning at the game of life. What does winning at the game of life, Brian, look like for you?
So it's funny you say that. I was married for a really long time. I had a really great relationship for many years. And when we both decided we were going to go our separate ways, I had said something to a group of people that I think kind of shocked them a little bit. And I said, for me going forward in a non selfish way, I'm just going to make decisions based upon what makes me happy. And if it makes me happy, I'm all in on it. And if it doesn't make me happy, then I'm just not all in on it. And so for me, that was kind of where I wanted to go. I have my own little personal rules about what makes me happy and how I decide on what I'm going to be a part of and what I'm not. And if you really keep it that simple, I'm very fortunate. I have a couple of kids in their 20s that like hanging around their dad, want to do things with their dad. And what I've learned is all they ever remember is the experiences that we had together. So I try to do all this stuff we're doing and figure out all this money and finance stuff and put myself in a financial position so that if all of a sudden tomorrow you said to me, we want to go to whatever it happens to be, and it was going to cost me 5 grand on a short trip to do it, and I wanted to do it, I wouldn't care. I would just spend the money, go and do it, and off we go. And it's funny because we're doing that here in about 3 weeks. We have a trip that me and my kids are taking up to Washington, and we're going to a couple of football games back to back days. Yeah, and that 48 hours or 72 hours is going to cost me probably about 6 grand, and I don't care. And so that's where my whole point of what I'm doing all this and what makes me happy. So it's like that's my goal, be able to keep doing those things so that one day, if this thing were to put off lots of money, I would love to be able to get, someday be able to just give all this information, keep giving it away to bigger and bigger audiences for free to help them. And if enough people are watching the channel is, like you said, it's brand new. There isn't but about 10 or 12 subscribers at this point to it. But I've learned that I don't care about the metrics. I don't care about the numbers. If I can affect one person, 5 people, 10 people, I never know who those people then go and affect. And it just starts to snowball outwards. And that's the whole point of all this, is just to leave the place better than you found it.
Well, I think that's wisdom. I think my son may not have the wisdom. He's going to ask how many subs Brian has, which is
Right.
subscribers, and that's his vanity metric
Yeah.
because he's young. But as you grow and get older, here's what I know: you just started this, but you didn't really
Yep.
just start the money playbook, right? Like
Right.
you've been doing the Complete Money Playbook, your entire life, and this is something that is a gift of yours. And I love it. I love that you're chasing your dreams, doing what makes you happy. I heard you say this. So if you have an audience, if you're listening right now and you have an audience of school kids or a group that you want Brian to speak to, I know he would love doing that. He said it, but I wanted to reiterate it that if you have a group of people that want to talk money and learn, get on there, subscribe to the Complete Money Playbook. We believe, Brian, that in the game of life, relationships win. Being good with
Absolutely.
money wins also, right? If you're going to choose to be poor with money or to be good with money, I'd rather be good with money. But
Absolutely.
in all things, we believe relationships win. My kids say, "Give this man his flowers," right? Which means send them the accolades, send them some appreciation. So if relationships win and we're going to send some flowers, who's somebody in your life that has been instrumental to get you where you are today? Who do you want to send some virtual flowers to today?
Yeah, I mean, that one's always super easy for me, and part of the reason why I talk about all this stuff is for my dad. I was lucky. I was one of those people that won the dad lottery. I got a good dad. Unfortunately, he passed away 15 years ago. So he hasn't got to see a lot of the stuff that we're now doing. And it's funny because many of the lessons that are used or stories that I talk about in trying to help people with money and finance are things that I jokingly say he did to me that I didn't know he was doing to me. Um, and then all of a sudden you find out when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you're like, and you realize what actually happened and what actually occurred over those years. um, yeah, it's just unfortunate that he isn't here to watch it and see it because, like I said, I was lucky that way. Not everybody gets to win the dad lottery, and this was a guy who came from literally a housing project in Manhattan, New York, that came from zero money, and him and his brother just figured it out. And where he learned the lessons and where he did these things or how he came up with this stuff, didn't go to college, barely made it through high school, and they just figure it out. And so I was fortunate because I didn't have to figure it out the way he did. I got to just keep running with the baton as he gave it to me. And so yeah, I mean that's an easy one for me. I was very fortunate that it's just a bummer. It was actually his birthday just a couple weeks ago, that he wasn't here to see more of this, even though he's obviously a huge part of it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Shout out to Dad. The
Yeah.
sounds like the Mr. Miyagi of money.
Somehow, man, he figured it out. I don't know.
That's
It's
awesome.
pretty
He
funny.
was teaching to paint the fence, and you didn't know what that was.
Oh, 100%.
The ripple effects of what he was trying to
Oh,
get you to do is great.
I got a million hilarious stories. I'll tell you another day, Brad, about some of the things he did that I had no idea till later, and you're just like, "Gosh, darn it."
That's funny.
Yeah,
That
crazy,
that's awesome. Well,
crazy. Yeah.
keep doing work. I know we've mentioned this a couple times, but why don't you share it now? How can people follow you? How can they support you? Where do people go to find you?
It's super easy. It's all one word, Complete Money Playbook. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and we actually have a website, same thing. It's all just completemoneyplaybook.com. I'm easy to find. And again, all this stuff really just started actually being publicly put out there about 6 or 8 weeks ago. So it's all relatively new stuff. There aren't a lot of people following it yet. And again, at the end of the day, I'm not worried about vanity metrics. I'm worried about trying to help people get somewhere. And if you're someone that watches these things and you have questions, catch me now because hopefully someday I'll have thousands of people wanting the information. But for now, if you send me a question, I'll personally be the one you talk to that can get you the information back. And not that I hope this is a bad thing, but I hope someday I won't be that person because there'll be so many people wanting the information. It'll be too many for me to individually respond back to.
Well, that's awesome. I've heard a lot of great things today, but I think the overarching theme here is you just got to be comfortable asking for help.
Yeah.
If you're not good at money or you have questions about money, if you are good with money and you have questions with money, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Just put yourself out there. If I want to get healthier, I got to go find somebody who knows more about health than I do. If I want to, put a budget together, a spending plan together, I need to go find somebody who's more comfortable with it than me. So I think it's great. Iron sharpens iron. I know I've been blessed, Brian. I appreciate you in my life. I appreciate the friendship we've built, and
Absolutely.
it started with real estate. It went to basketball, and now we're talking money, and I think we just help each other grow. So thank you for being a
Absolutely.
guest today. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Brad. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, again, if you've liked this episode, if you want more of this type of content, screenshot this, tag us, tag Brian, tag myself, the Complete Money Playbook, and we'll make more of this. And like I said at the beginning, if you don't tag us, then probably won't talk about this again. So, thanks for your time again, and have a great day.